Welcome to the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, episode number 182. A little progress every day adds up to big results. Mongo Wilder.
Broadcasting from the back alley in Hollywood, it's the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, where we show you how to survive and thrive as an indie filmmaker in the jungles of the film biz. And here's your host, Alex Ferrari.
Welcome, my Indie Film Hustlers, to a special episode of the Indie Film Hustle Podcast. I am your humble guest, Alex Ferrari. Today's show is sponsored by Video Blocks. Now, guys, when I was shooting my show for Legendary Pictures, and I did that 96 pages in 4 days, I actually got into post and we used a lot of stock footage, stock sounds, and even some graphics from Video Blocks. They are an amazing resource. With your membership, you are granted the rights to use that footage forever, in perpetuity, on any projects you want to. So if you want to try a 7-day free trial, and by the way, anything you download during those 7 days is yours to keep. And if you decide to stay, you get 84% off the yearly membership. It is well worth it, guys. Trust me, if you do a lot of production, it is something you really need. So just head over to videoblocks.com/hustle. That's videoblocks.com/hustle. So you heard right. Today, I am the guest of this podcast. I had a Indie Film Hustle Tribe member, Rob Alicea, reach out to me and propose that he do an interview with me because for some godforsaken reason, he believes that a lot of the Indie Film Hustle Tribe wants to know more about me. And I was like, really? You guys don't listen to me enough? You want to get deeper into this crazy head that is me? And he's like, I really feel that a lot of the tribe and filmmakers would really like to know a little bit more about you and things that you just haven't talked about on the podcast before. So I said, sure. And we recorded it a little bit ago, and it was a really great experience. I talked about a lot of stuff I've never talked about, and Rob was an amazing host. So I'm not going to talk anymore. I'm going to go right into our interview. So thank you, Rob Alicea, for being an amazing host, and here we go.
Welcome to the show, fellow indie film hustlers. This is not Alex Ferrari. This is actually Rob Alicea, a fellow member of your tribe, an independent filmmaker. And today, bringing you a special show, I'm interviewing Alex Ferrari. How about that?
The horror.
Oh my gosh.
It's really interesting how, for everyone listening, Rob actually just reached out to me. He's like, hey, man, I'd love to hear a podcast with you just being interviewed by somebody about you. And I'm like, do you really want to hear more about me? And I was listening to him and why don't you explain exactly why you kind of put this whole thing together, Rob?
Yeah, totally. Well, I first started listening to your podcast probably close to about a year ago. And immediately, started listening as much as I could because obviously, your energy and your love and passion for indie film is so infectious and you genuinely want to help people. And started to learn, a little bit about your background, but a lot about, technically what you've been doing, getting started as an editor, and now obviously shooting your feature, This Is Meg. And I said, you know what? I want to know more about this guy, what drives him? Because, you're a workaholic, man. I think I'm a workaholic sometimes, but I feel like you work 90% of the people I know under the table. And I just wanted to know more about what drives you. To even start the indie film hustle and, just how you balance life being someone who's married and has kids. It's crazy. What we do is crazy. But I thought this would be something really cool for your audience who I'm sure wonders probably some of the very same questions I was wondering. So I said, hey, why don't we do this? And here we are.
Yeah. And I said, sure. I think it'd be a fun interview to do. So without any further ado, Rob, ask away, sir.
Sure. So, I think first and foremost, maybe a two-parter, why film and, what is the story of how you found film and how did you know you wanted to become a filmmaker?
Well, I got started back in the Chaplin days. No, I actually got started. My first time I ever really felt like I even wanted to be in the film business was when I just finished watching E.T. And I came out of the theater and I was blown away, and I was in second grade at the time. And I went home and started writing a script. I didn't know what a script was or anything. I just started writing basically the story that I just saw. That was the first time I ever remember ever wanting to be in the business, because you have to remember back then in the 80s, there was no film business. That was not a career choice. It was something on the outskirts. There's not a lot of information about filmmaking or being in the film industry at all. So after that, I just was always a big fan of movies, but then I went to work at a video store when I was 15. Actually, when I was 14, I started when I was working at a video store. And that video store, I worked there for about 4 or 5 years, something like that. And during that time, I amassed a collection of about 3,000 VHSs.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty insane. I was a pretty obsessive kind of guy back then. Not that I'm much different now, but I watched so many movies, and I cataloged them and just started studying them again and again and again. And when I left the video store, or actually when I got out of high school, my mom asked me, "What do you want to do?" And I looked around my room and I said, "Well, I guess I'm going to be a film director." And she's like, "All right, let's go to film school." And that started my journey into the crazy dream, the dream that is the worst thing in the world, but yet the most wonderful thing in the world, of being a filmmaker and finding that balance between the love and the hate, the ups and the downs of being an independent filmmaker. And I've only, after 20 years, have kind of fallen in love with the journey as opposed to the goal. And that takes time to learn. And it took me longer than I wish it did, but I really now just love the grind. I love the daily in and out. I love the grind of chasing the dream and doing the work. The goals are, like when I got to, and we'll talk about Meg in a minute, but when I had the premiere at the Chinese theater, it was kind of like, okay, great, let's go. Next. Like, it wasn't the goal was just part of my journey. It was just like, hey, when we got distributed and got picked up by Hulu and all that stuff, I'm like, great, that's another, let's move on. Before it would have been the end all be all. And then I would have just stayed there, in trying to stay in that goal moment in that final peak of the mountain. But for me, it's always another mountain. I enjoy the climb rather than the peak. But that's a long answer to a very simple question.
No, I mean, I love it. I mean, and what I always found like super cool was you grew up in Queens. I actually grew up in Queens as well, so we have that in common. Was there? I know you said kind of there wasn't, but I mean, did you ever meet any other fellow filmmakers or aspiring filmmakers that much like yourself, are still hitting that grind? Growing up, film school? In
film school, of course, I met a bunch of people at film school. One of my teachers was the associate producer of Pretty Woman and was in Parenthood, another Ron Howard movie back in the 80s. And that, to me, I thought was he was Hollywood. It was like he was that was the end all be all, because I had never seen anybody or never even spoken to anybody that worked on a movie that I'd actually had seen. But I just met people along the way. Before, I didn't meet anybody really. I didn't meet like in a video store or anything like that. I was in, Fort Lauderdale, for God's sake. So,
wow.
I was, a mom and pop shop, but I was as far out from the film industry as you can imagine. So it's fascinating to me just to look back at like how the hell I even got to where I am right now. But it's the journey, and just doing that work and getting out there and pounding it. But yeah, I didn't meet anybody along the way. I've met many people since, very exciting people along the way, and that have helped me on my journey, and it's just been cool to meet. But that not back then before I got started. No.
Well, that's awesome, man. Yeah, I mean, so now you're in Los Angeles, is that correct, or you're in Florida?
Oh no, I'm in LA.
Yeah. So now what made you decide LA, like let's say, as opposed to New York? I mean, when I hear about LA, for example, I have friends that are, both filmmakers and actors. They always say there's a lot of work out there. So that's why a lot of of them go. But there's also so much in New York. I mean, what made you say, no way, I'm not staying in Queens anymore, I got to go to LA?
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show. Originally, I didn't have a choice to leave Queens. I was taken by my mother when I was 10 years old. And then from 10 years old until my mid-30s, I lived in Florida. So New York, I grew up in New York. I was born in Florida, grew up in New York, and went back to Florida. And New York was just really never an idea. When I said I was going to move to LA, I was like, I gotta go to LA, I gotta go to Hollywood. And being from New York and understanding and knowing a lot of people who work in New York in the film industry, there's such a big difference between East Coast and West Coast as far as the industries are concerned. If the film industry left New York tomorrow, New York is still New York.
Sure.
If the film industry left LA, the whole city would crash.
I never thought of it like that. That makes a lot of sense.
Because LA was built, it's a city built on the industry. New York is not it's like if even like if the financial district left New York, it's still New York. There's a lot of things in New York that, make New York. LA was built upon the film industry. There was nothing here. It was desert before, Chaplin and the boys showed up and started making movies here.
Sure. Well, let me ask you this. For let's say up-and-coming independent filmmakers, which obviously that is your audience, what do you recommend? Should they try their hand at New York? The age-old adage, right? If you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. Mm-hmm. Or would you recommend someone, hey, take the plunge, go out to LA?
Well, there's a couple of different answers to that. One, if you're in a certain market, a smaller market like Miami, let's say, and you're young, you're going to be able to do things in a smaller market that you won't be able to do in LA or New York when you're first starting out. You can grab a bunch of friends. You can go out and shoot in the streets. You can, grab some cheap camera gear and you can go make content. If you have those resources, probably houses and businesses and places you can go shoot and go out and make some content. I would do that first. If I was starting today and I was 20, and I was in Miami, I would probably be making a handful of feature films, as many as I can get my hands on, and start just knocking it out, learning as much as I can along the way. Once you have a base of kind of work behind you, then you could come out to LA or New York. I argue LA rather than New York, purely because, again, everything is about the business out here. Like you just drive around and everything is the business. New York is not like that. You're gonna have to hunt and peck a little bit more to get to find the jobs, to find the tribe. Out here they're everywhere. I mean, you can't walk into a Starbucks without you seeing Final Draft on someone's computer. It's the oldest joke here in LA. Like, you cannot walk into a Starbucks. Everyone's writing a screenplay. There's always somebody in the business. So to be completely engulfed like that and immersed in the industry, that's why LA is such a special place. But that's when I came out here, I already had 10 years, 12 years of work behind me. So when I landed, I was able to start working right away. I tried to come out to LA in 2002 and LA ate my lunch. I completely got my ass handed to me, and I went back to Florida with my tail between my legs because I was not ready. People saw me coming from a mile away, and I had a nice reel and everything, but it was just not enough. It was a very hard grind. Rather, when I showed up, almost 10 years ago, I was ready to rock, and then I just hit the ground running. So that's what I would suggest. If someone's coming out right now, I would try to get something under their belt first. Again, if your resources and you have the money to kind of live out here for 12 months, and by the way, you got to have, if you're going to come out here, you got to have at least 12 months worth of money to survive, because it's going to take you that long to probably find work or start building up relationships that you're going to need to do what you want to do. And you can have roommates. You could be 1 or 2, 3 roommates, whatever it is. But you have to have enough money to be able to come out here and live for a year. If you're going to come out here for a month, like I did in 2002, you're done. You'll get your ass handed to you.
Well, let me ask you this. Now, obviously, being in this business, you often hear, do not go to LA unless you have an agent. Now, that's something I know I personally hear all the time. What do you think about that? I mean,
that's absolutely
do you agree?
bullshit. No, it's absolute bullshit. I don't have an agent. I haven't had an agent. I had a manager once who really didn't do a whole heck of a lot for me. God bless his heart. He tried, but look, the whole agent manager thing, and I know a lot of filmmakers get caught up with this. I did. I finally came to a point where, like, I'm not going to chase managers or agents anymore. If they want me, they can come get me. I'm going to do me.
I hear you 1,000%. There were times in my life where I got really caught up in that, and not to put you over too much, but well, I'll put you over. I mean, it was just moments of listening to your podcast that reminded me, like, it just doesn't matter. It's about the work and about doing the work, and I think that's a thing that I've learned in my years of doing it. I mean, I'm a fairly young guy at 34, and I think I just learned it this year. I think it was the culmination of everything that if you just do the work, surround yourself with good people, your tribe, as we call it, right? Then you're going to be fine, because it's so easy to get caught up in that who's repping who and who is getting this distribution deal. And, all of a sudden it stops being about the work and stops being about actual storytelling. And I think, it happens to the best of us. So I'm really glad to hear you say that, hey, you know what? You don't necessarily need to have the agent or manager. That can come later. I mean, it can come at any time, and I think in an actor or filmmaker's life.
With the whole agent and manager thing, you have to understand that if you're going to start playing that Hollywood game, that's the major leagues. Okay, when you start coming in and you start playing, and you're trying to, like, oh, who's going to rep me? I'm going to be at CAA. I'm going to be at William Morris, or I'm going to be at Endeavor, or whoever, or what Paradigm, whatever agency you're going to be at. When you start playing that game, it's a game. It's a major league game. If you're coming out of the bush leagues, you're coming out of college ball, if we're going to use baseball analogies, then you're not ready to play that game. Now, there's always a phenom. There's always that kid that comes out of college, goes straight to the pros. And there are those people, without question, there are those people. But most of us aren't. You got to work your way up until you start playing in those leagues. I feel comfortable enough right now in my career where if an agent shows up, I'm ready to play. I've been around the block enough times. But I'm not going to play the game of chasing it, because that was the problem I got. That's what took me 20 years to get Meg made, because I kept chasing that, the feature or the money or the agent's going to get me the money. Like, look, you got to just do the work, man, and not play the game. If you start playing the game too early, you're done. And it is a game. It is a political game. It is as much as a creative and a business game, it's also a political game, and I was talking to an agent once, and they said, I need a director who is part creative, part businessman, part politician. And that's the perfect director that I'm looking to rep. And he was repping Guillermo del Toro at the time. So
there you go.
So, and you go, those are the people, the Spielbergs, the Lucases, the Camerons, the Finchers. These all have those three things. Some, argue that James Cameron is not very political anymore, but he's a giant. He doesn't have to be, but at the beginning, you've got to play that game. If you're going to play in the big leagues, or you can just kind of reject all of that and do your own thing, because nowadays you can, look at the Duplass brothers.
Absolutely. They're amazing, those guys. I mean, inspiring.
No, Mark and Jay, I was reading the other day that they said, I read this story. It was just an amazing story of love. They look, when we first got here after Puffy Chair and we won, Sundance and everything, we got an agent, and the agent starts sending us around, and we call it the water bottle tour, where you just go around to all the agents, and everyone takes meetings, and everybody wants to talk to you about doing something. And after every meeting, they would walk out. I'm like, hey, these guys really want to work with us. These guys are going to make our next movie. A year later, nothing had happened. So they realized, they said, wait a minute, these are all a waste of time. So they called their agents up and said, no more meetings. And they said, what? That's the way Hollywood works. So like, it's not working for us. So no more meetings. We make movies, not meetings. And that's it.
I remember, I think I was listening to an interview, and forgive me, I don't remember which of the brothers it was with, but they were saying how, you know, they started getting submitted for directors' jobs, and it's almost like you know, trying to submit your ballot for Homecoming King. It was like such a popularity contest, and they said, you know what, we just got to go out there and make our movies because we're going to keep putting our, you know, our hats in the how do you want to say, in the race.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
To try to get these directing jobs, and we're not actually doing what we love to do, which is making movies. So they just said, just do it. And I think that kind of leads me to, I think, another question that I'm super curious about, because, you know, I think a whole big part about what the indie film hustle, you know, movement and what you're doing stands for, at least from my perspective, is also this feeling about, you know, you can do it on your own. So, you know, besides, you know, the accumulation of your years of experience, I mean, can you pinpoint, you know, a feeling, or, you know, what was that internal shift for you where you kindly said, you know, or you finally said rather, like, I'm just going to start doing me and I'm not going to focus on the agent? Like, was it a particular moment? Was it a buildup of experiences?
Well, I'll tell you what, there is, I don't know if I've ever spoken about this specifically on the podcast, so this might be an exclusive. I've spoken about it in other places, but I've never actually sat down and talked about this. I actually left the business for a little bit. Did you ever hear anything about that?
I do not recall.
Okay, so there was about 5 years ago, when my daughters were born, I had this bright idea of opening up an olive oil and vinegar tasting shop.
Yes.
Right. So I opened up this olive oil and vinegar tasting shop. It was the largest shop in Los Angeles at the time. From the idea of having the shop, 4 months later, we had a store on Ventura Boulevard here by Laurel Canyon, which is a very expensive place to be as a retail shop, and a lot of traffic and so on. And I did that because I felt really beaten down over the course of the last couple years prior to that I was just chasing a lot of post jobs, and I was directing here and there, but I was getting beat up by distributors and just like chasing money, and I was just kind of burnt. Working on really not the greatest projects in the world. It was just more paycheck stuff. And my soul was just kind of gone, I was just really tired. So I opened up this business, and I always kept one foot in the business, in the film industry, always do a job here or there. But I kind of, towards the second year, I kind of really stopped doing a lot of film industry stuff because I was focusing on this company. And during that time in my life, I worked harder in those 3 years than I had worked in the prior 17 in the film industry. It was the most brutal, physically brutal time of my life, emotionally, spiritually, everything. And I literally was just, pounding it day in, day out. I would be going out, at the peak of our company, we were doing 25 farmers markets a week.
Wow.
And doing 30,000 to 60,000 people events. And I was, I was the best sales guy we had. And, I was working 4 or 5 days a week, 6 days a week, just really brutal 8-hour days out in the, in the hot sun selling olive oil. And I would just be sitting there sometimes going, what the hell am I doing? It was actually there was a moment in the middle of that where I'm good friends with the guys from Holly Shorts Film Festival. So they actually invited me to come and do an olive oil tasting at their opening night, where I have opened multiple movies with them. So I'm sitting there watching the filmmakers walk in and out, and I'm there with a fucking olive oil spoon. And I'm going, what the fuck am I doing? Like, I felt like absolute crap that day. I was just like, what? And that was like the first chink in the armor for this whole olive oil thing. And about a year left in our 3-year lease, I started figuring that I'm like, I got to do something else. I got to get back into the business somehow. So I started doing research on how to open up an online business, and figuring out that whole social media marketing and social media and marketing, and just creating an online business. And then the idea for doing something in the film industry came up. Originally, it was my wife's idea, because I was just going to go off and do another business, being the hand sanitizer guy. Like, you want to know about hand sanitizer, I'm the dude. All the content you want to know about hand sanitizer, I'll be that guy. I'm just using that as an example. But my wife was like, why don't you do something in the film industry? I'm like, yeah, I'll open something up. Don't worry. Yeah, I'll think about it. And then, like, a few months would go by. She's like, you working on that thing yet? I'm like, all right, fine. I'll start something with filmmaking. I'll start something with filmmaking. Then as I started getting into it, I'm like, I'm such an idiot. Why wouldn't I do indie filmmaking? Like, it just was the stupidest thing ever. So finally it's like, okay, I think I can, let me check the business. Just let me check the landscape. So 3 years ago, I looked at what was going on online, and I really hadn't seen a lot of websites, blogs, or podcasts that was telling it really, coming from a good place. Yeah, telling it really in raw, because a lot of the people out there didn't have my experience, hadn't walked the path I've walked for 20 odd years. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to throw my hat in the ring, and I'm going to come out there and I'm going to just be me. So when I launched Indie Film Hustle in July of 2015, within a month, I was already larger than a lot of the guys that had been around for 5 or 10 years. And they started contacting me and like, hey, who are you? Like, where the hell did you come from? Because all of a sudden I was everywhere. And if anybody listening knows, and you're on Facebook or Twitter, you know I'm everywhere. Yeah. I post a lot, and I get my stuff out there. So then about a month later, I open up the podcast, and I start launching it. Within 3 months, we became the '1 filmmaking podcast on iTunes.
That's amazing.
It was insane. And it kind of grew from there very rapidly. And 2 years later, we are where we are. But during that journey, I wanted to help. I truly wanted to help. And I've been wanting to do this back from 2005, when I released my short film Broken, and a guerrilla filmmaking school, that nobody had ever done before prior to that. So I always wanted to help filmmakers, because they're my
They're your people.
They're my people, man. I know my people well, because I'm the people too. All the questions I ask my guests are questions I want to know about. And that's probably why a lot of filmmakers love the podcast, because I ask things I want to talk. I'm not going to ask them stupid, stuff. I'm going to ask them what I want to know about. So the podcast continued to grow and grow, and the website started growing. And as I started going through this, when you podcast, you're talking into a microphone. You really don't know if anyone's listening. It's a weird thing, because it's not an instant gratification thing. Yeah, you see some downloads, but they're numbers. You don't have faces to those numbers. So as the podcast continued to grow and grow, I started getting contacted by the tribe, by this group of people, group of filmmakers and artists that had started following and listening to the podcast and following and listening and reading stuff on the blog. And then those stories started coming out, and the thank yous, and I was reading the people were giving, the podcast was giving them hope. And I'm like, oh my God, like, that's insane. I can't believe what I'm doing in my office is affecting so many people. So all of a sudden it became real to me. Like, oh my God, I got a responsibility. Like, these people, these filmmakers, really are enjoying what I'm doing and finding tremendous amount of value in what I'm doing. So I wanted to continue to grow it and build it and start getting better and better and better at what I do. We're at episode 181 right now as of this recording. And that's insane.
and I think you know what I think what you hit on, and I think a lot of people maybe don't necessarily speak about or cover. I mean, your website covers a lot of like great and interesting tutorials and a lot of the technical side of filmmaking, if you will. And I think that what your podcast, what it really serves, and has served me, I'm sure served pretty much everybody who's listening at some point, is just even the emotional side of this business, which can be very taxing and very tolling.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
And I think it's a part that, a lot of people don't often talk about because, everyone loves a great Hollywood success story. But, a lot of people don't talk about those moments where you're down in the dumps or you're getting ready to call it quits. I think we've all felt that. I know I felt that. And again, I'm sure a lot of people who are listening have felt those moments. I think for me, obviously I always loved hearing the different interviews. But what I always got and what really, helped me and what I really enjoyed, is also just hearing, your energy, like I said, and your drive, because I mean, man, you got more energy than most people I know. And it's crazy. But I think, it goes hand in hand that, it's like drinking while you pour, right? I mean, you're still an active filmmaker, but you're also giving to other people at the same time. And I think that can't be understated how important that is, to also, serve those next generation of filmmakers, those people that are, trying to do what you're doing, but don't even really have an idea how to even get started. So, that's at least for me personally speaking, I think has been one of the best parts of, my journey, as a tribe member and, as a loyal listener. And, now I'm telling my friends to listen to it. And I got one of my best friends to listen to his first episode the other day. So,
you're like a drug pusher. I love it.
I try. Speaking of which, I mean, it sounds like too, when you were getting into the olive oil business, and totally correct me if I'm wrong, but part of it could also be too now, right? You're married and now you had kids, and now it's kind of like that moment where like, well, do I have to quote unquote be serious, right? Or quote unquote get a real job or whatnot?
I don't think it was the whole real job thing, because I've never been a real job thing guy. I've been fired from both staff positions I ever had. This is going back many years. So I was never, I've always been a freelancer. I've always been my own boss for the most part. And my wife signed up for this train. She knew that. And it took her a while to get used to, but she knows that I always provide and there's always going to be work. No matter what, it always is. And that's it always has happened to me that way. I think that for me, I was just burnt. I was burnt out in a way that this town does and no other place does. Like, you'll get work here. The kind of work you get is a whole other story, but you will get work. There's always some work somewhere. And coming from a smaller market like Miami, I came in here right as the crash happened. So in 2008 the crash happened 3 months after I arrived, and I worked steadily for the next 4 years without no problems whatsoever, because I was just happy to work, but I was taking everything that walked in the door I would take, because I was hungry. I was hungry. I wanted to get more stuff under my belt, and I hustled hard, but I think I was just so burnt out that I thought I needed
step away.
I thought I needed something else. I thought maybe this isn't for me anymore, because I don't know about you, and I'm sure everyone listening to this could kind of feel this, is multiple times during my journey, I have stopped and said, I can't do this anymore. I got to go. I got to do something else. And you just throw your hands up in the air. That project falls through, the money doesn't get dropped, whatever. And then it always turns in 5 minutes later, you're like, well, what else are you going to do?
Yeah.
That's generally the answer, right? Like, what else are you going to do? And then unfortunately, one day I said, olive oil. You know,
yeah, totally.
That's, I think, another thing that I try to do on the podcast and in the blog as well is to be more open than most. I don't really have a fear of being open about myself to a certain extent. I keep my private life private, but when it comes to my journey as a filmmaker, I'm very open with my journey and my experiences when other people are deathly afraid of that. There's not a lot of filmmakers out there who would have even acknowledged that they had opened up an olive oil company, because you start thinking like, oh God, if I say something, then all the haters are going to come out and say, oh, he's just an olive oil guy. Why should I listen to this guy? You know what I mean? There's that fear, that little voice in the back of your head. But I made a decision to say, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to be me. And I'm going to be authentic, and I'm going to be who I am. And if you notice, all the big YouTubers, all the big guys out there, they're all doing them,
Yeah.
They're all doing, they don't care. They're just going to do who they are. And that's it, and that's where I kind of grew into it. And as the time passed, when I opened up Indie Film Hustle, as time progressed and I started getting more and more confident. I mean, if you go back and listen to some of those first episodes, oh, Jesus Christ. Oh, they're so, I don't know how far back you've listened to.
Now I want to.
Now they're just, they're kind of brutal if I listen to them. I mean, there's great information on there, but a friend of mine, Scott from Film Trooper, he was telling me, he's like, Alex, man, I love your podcast, and you've got this great opening, like, from the back streets of Hollywood, come Alex Ferrari. And then, and he goes, here's your host, Alex Ferrari. And then you would hear me, how you doing, guys? I'm Alex Ferrari today. And I have no energy, like, whatsoever. And it's just brutal. Now I try to keep the energy up the entire time. But yeah, if anybody listening wants to get a good laugh, go listen to any one of the first 10 or 20 episodes. They're quite entertaining.
Well, let me ask you, on that note, do you have a favorite interview that you've ever conducted so far on the Indie Film Hustle podcast?
My favorite episode, I can tell you right off the top, is episode 88, where I lost my mind and started cursing for an hour, and told people like why filmmakers are always so effing broke and what they could do to fix it.
I remember that one. I was listening to that one. I think it was like 6 o'clock in the morning.
And what happened when you heard me start talking?
Honestly, I was like kind of laughing my ass off, and people were like looking at me, and they were like, because like I love listening to podcasts. I mean, I love listening to them in the morning and when I get up. Sometimes I bring my phone into the shower, I even listen. It's waterproof. Sure. And I'm just always listening because I'm always like just trying to just gain more and more knowledge. I mean, because this is like you, it's my life, my passion. I feel like I just need more, and I just couldn't stop laughing, man, because I get it. It's true. I mean, like there was like literally nothing you said that I could really disagree with in that episode, but for me also too, like that's the one thing that I think has always kept me, like, I'm not gonna lie, there are some podcasts I listen to, and then I listen to them and I subscribe for, and I kind of drop off. The one thing that keeps me listening to you is your authenticity. The fact that you can be vulnerable, because that's real. And, I feel like as a filmmaker, just authenticity in life and about who you are, when you're not behind the camera, that can only make your work in front of the camera better. Mm-hmm. It's like you're breaking that barrier. And that's, I think that's like, something that you got going for you. So, let me just say, don't ever change. So that's
thank you. That's a big compliment. Thank you very much. Yeah, I appreciate it, Rob.
Well, I guess, let's listen. Fast forward, you put out This Is Meg, which I purchased and was super happy that you did that, because, like when I posted on my social media accounts, I was like, this is a guy who, practices what he preaches. He's not just someone that's saying to go out there with your camera. This is a guy that did it. Now I guess how you want to say adopted, some might say an unusual filmmaking method with your scriptment. Mm-hmm, now, can you tell like people a little bit more about that? Because I'm going to be honest with you, I never heard of it before I heard it on your episode, but I want to hear more.
So a scriptment is basically, well, look, I'll start a little bit farther back from that. I I was attached to a project, and it was really, it went south again. I had already gone casting. I had already met agents and managers and all this kind of stuff. And it went south again. And I was just so exhausted and tired of waiting around that I decided that I said, screw it. I'm just going to go make my movie. And I don't care. I don't have a script. I don't have anything, but I'm making a movie in the next couple months, and I'm not going to wait around anymore. So that's when I called Jill up and I said, Jill, I want to make a movie about you in your life with all your crazy friends. And let's do it. And I told her in the style that I wanted to do it, which was a very Duplass Brothers style, which is, writing a scriptment. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show. Now, what a scriptment is a very structured outline. Sometimes it has dialogue, depending on the scenes, like we did. Some scenes have no dialogue, just has beats. So things that have to happen within the story, and the actor is free to get to each of those mile markers however they like to get to it. So as long as this is covered in the scene, I don't care how you get to it. So what that does is it creates a really raw and real performance from the actors, because they're not memorizing anything. It's coming to their head very conversationally in a way that I couldn't write if I wanted to. Now, this works because I had an insane cast, which were all seasoned professionals and all seasoned actors and seasoned improvers that all just came and brought their A game, and they just showed up and had fun. I wouldn't have done this with a bunch of brand new actors that had never acted before or done one or two things. It'd be a little bit more difficult to do. I wouldn't have been able to move as quickly. I was dealing with professionals at every level through this entire production. And I also carried, a toolbox of 20 odd years of tools that I've been carrying around with me for years. So I brought a lot to the table as well. So that's the only way that kind of works. But if you want to kind of quickly put together something, a scriptment's a wonderful way of doing it. The Duplass brothers do it all the time, and it works for them. You have to find actors who are improv, that know improv and can really perform it well. And if they have that, and you as a director have to kind of just let go. And I did. On This Is Meg, I completely let go. I was just there capturing the lightning. Like, all right, guys, this is the angles, let's go. And that's all I did. And it was such a freeing experience. It was a wonderful experience. I wouldn't say this is going to be for every movie I ever do, but it's a wonderful experience to do and a wonderful way of doing movies. It just gives the energy a little bit different, and you can move much quicker. Now, it's a pain in the butt to cut. Jesus.
That was going to be my number one question, because when I heard about this scriptment, as I know when I've directed, I've had editors that say, I really wish that actor hadn't improvised so much. They're great, but it's a nightmare for editing. So how does that end up working? And how did you not go nuts on set?
Well, on set, you don't go nuts. You just kind of go and you shoot. When you get into the post room, I actually edited This Is Meg in 3 weeks. So
wow.
I cut Meg in 3 weeks, and the performances overall, I'm going to say that once they landed the improv, they pretty much stayed close to the improv with a couple variations here or there. But again, I was dealing with very high-end professionals. So editing it was a pain. Don't get me wrong, because I didn't edit it like a Reno 911, where you jump cut. I actually edited it as a narrative because that's the only way I know how to cut. So when Jill saw it, she was expecting a Reno 911 style edit. And when she saw me actually cutting it like a real feature, she's like, oh my God, how did you do that? I'm like, it took a while, but I'm a quick cutter, man. Again, it's 20 odd years of tools that you bring with you that, I've cut stuff like that before. Nothing as extreme as that, but you just do it. Like everything, man, you just do it. Like people always ask, like, how did you handle twins? I'm like, you just do it. You don't know any better. You don't know what the rules are. So you just do it. And same thing goes for this. I didn't know you're not supposed to edit, improv like a narrative, but I did. And it worked out. I think it worked out really well. And the flow of the movie works. And most people watching it can't tell that majority of the movie was improv. So that it was a little bit of a nightmare. Honestly, color correction took me much longer.
Well, then I just want to tell you that I'm very, very happy for you. And, you know, again, I want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Don't worry, the interview's not over, but I'm still giving you my gratitude. But I want to take a page out of Tim Ferriss's book.
Yes.
And before we go, I'm going to give you a couple of rapid fire questions.
Yes, go for it, man.
All right. So, and I'll take this directly from Tim Ferriss. Mm-hmm. When you hear the word success, who comes to mind and why?
Oh man, and I've listened to Tim's podcast so much too. He's honestly the reason why I started Indie Film Hustle. He was the book. The 4-Hour Work Week was the reason why I even got the idea for Indie Film Hustle. If I had one person I can say that had success, man, Wayne Dyer.
Which Wayne Dyer, a particular one? Because I'm a big Dyer fan.
Wayne Dyer, the spiritual guru, if you will. Yeah, you know who I'm talking about, right?
Oh yeah, no, I love Wayne Dyer, absolutely.
Yeah, so Wayne Dyer is I had the pleasure of meeting him before he passed.
Oh man,
and his energy was so wonderful. He even flirted with my wife. It was wonderful.
Big compliment right there.
But Wayne, I kind of wanted to be in a weird way. I wanted to kind of be a Wayne Dyer-esque kind of person for the film business and for artists in general, because I feel that artists are such a needed group in humanity. Without art, we can't move forward in all sorts of arts, whether it be written, music, film, any of it. I'm a filmmaker, so that's why I identify more with filmmakers, but artists in general. I wanted to kind of give artists a way to hope, to let them know that, like, look, you can make a living doing this. And that this whole starving artist thing is BS. It's complete BS. Michelangelo was a very rich man. He worked, he charged for his art. This whole mentality, which I think came around in the 1800s or 1900s, this whole starving artist thing. But artists throughout time have made money doing what they do. It can work, and it does work. And in today's world, there's absolutely no excuse, but you have to do the work. And I wanted to kind of be a little bit of a beacon of light, a beacon of hope, a beacon of information for filmmakers and for artists. And that's why Wayne, I feel, did that on a much grander scale, and helped, millions of people over the course of his lifetime. And when you start helping people and you start, I don't say guiding, but all I can say is, like, a teacher is someone who's walked the path a little bit farther than you have. Like if Steven Spielberg walks in the door right now, I'm like, Mr. Spielberg, I have 1,000 questions. It's like there's always someone who's maybe walked ahead of you a little bit more. And then there's giants like Spielberg or Nolan or Fincher, these guys. But I try to just give the information I have, that of my experience. So I might have been just a little bit ahead of you, and I can talk to you. So all of a sudden now you're a teacher because I just happen to know how to hit that hammer on that nail a little bit better than you might be doing it because I've been doing it a little longer. So that's what I try to do. I try to, share my life experience now with filmmakers and hopefully help them along their way. And look, this podcast has grown into ways that I can't even imagine. And the website has grown, and I'm going to be doing a bunch of new stuff on YouTube coming up. I'm connecting with people in a way that I never do. And when you start helping people, truthfully, coming from a good place, it's addictive. And then I become very selfish in that way, because now I want to help as many people as I can. I want to help as many filmmakers as I can. No matter where my career goes, I want to always try to continue sharing that adventure and sharing that with the tribe and with anyone who will listen, because I think it's so valuable. I wish I had someone like that. And maybe it's because I never had a mentor growing up. I was always my own mentor, by listening to Laserdisc commentaries and DVDs and watching movies and reading books, where I kind of had to mentor myself. and it's extremely difficult to do that. I want to be able to do that for other filmmakers and for other artists. So I think why I feel Wayne is my answer is because I really I think he did it in a way that I would love to emulate. And he wasn't a perfect man by any stretch. If Rob, you know Wayne's story, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And he's learned along the way, he became who he became over years, decades of, not only helping other people, but helping himself. And that's what I would like to do for the tribe and for anyone who would listen, is to be able to help them by me helping myself and going down my path. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show. But then sharing that information with everybody else.
Well, and I think you're absolutely doing it. And I heard a quote one time that I think, really goes along with what you're saying, that, you don't need to be fully healed in order to teach wound care, if you will, so you can still be a beginner or intermediate in your career, and still try to help people. And I think that, it's my hope, as I'm sure it is yours, that for people listening to this, we're always told it's such a grind, which, we love the grind, but it's also so competitive and, don't help anyone. You got to get ahead. But, I myself have always helped people. I think I'm very much known as that kind of person. So I think that's why even before we actually ever spoke, I felt a connection to you, and why I think I enjoy so much your work, because, you're that kind of guy. And I think you'll continue to inspire the tribe to also, give unto others, if you will.
No, and one thing is when you were saying, like, it's very competitive and this and that, I kind of don't believe that anymore. And
I don't believe it either, because who are you competing against? You can anybody can make a movie. Like,
look, guys, everyone listening, you're not competing against, I'm not competing against Rob. Rob's not competing against me. Why wouldn't you help each other in one way, shape, or form to get each other's projects done? It's art. It's not like we're both making an iPhone. It's like we're both making different things and we're helping each other along the way. The reason why Spielberg, Scorsese, De Palma, Coppola, and Milius, all those guys coming up, were able to make it is because they knocked on Hollywood's door and Hollywood wouldn't let them in back in the 70s. So then they started helping each other out for free, like without questions. And they would just help each other out because they knew that they were all competing to try to get a job in Hollywood, but they just helped each other out on each other's projects, and they all grew because of it. Rising waters, rising tide lifts all boats. And, the story about Milius, Spielberg, and I think it's De Palma, the way they shared their points.
I do not.
No, it was Spielberg, Milius, and Lucas. And the story is that they all helped each other out on their movies. A movie called Star Wars, movie called Jaws. I think it was Jaws or Close Encounters, I think. One of the two. And Milius did on Big Sunday. Or on any given Sunday. No, not on any given Sunday. No, Big Sunday or something like that. It's a surf movie. And they all swapped points on it. So Spielberg and Lucas did fairly well, but Milius actually did better than all of them. But they were like, "Well, look, I'm thank you for the Star Wars points," because Milius had Star Wars points, and they just gave it away. And then Lucas and Spielberg are always asking, like, "Where are we going to get our big Sunday money coming up?" But that's the way they helped each other along the way. They didn't care. They were friends. And I think as filmmakers, you've got to help each other out, man, because it is rough out here and it is tough and it is brutal and there's no question about it. But at the end of the day, you're in a race with yourself and nobody else.
That's it. I love it. All right. I'm going to give you two more questions.
Sure.
I've been having you on long enough. We're going to get back to the wife and kids.
I'm good. I've got time, dude. I can talk.
Me too. So if you could recommend, and I have a feeling I may know this answer, but I'm going to put myself to the challenge anyway. If you had to recommend one book to a filmmaker, someone starting out or even someone that's been in it, what would that book be and why?
The Alchemist.
Alchemist. Okay. Now tell the tribe a little bit about The Alchemist. That book single-handedly changed my life, by the way.
Of course. Yeah, it is. It does, because The Alchemist is by an amazing author named Pablo Coelho, who's I think Brazilian, if I'm not mistaken.
Paulo Coelho. Yeah, he is Brazilian.
Yeah, he's a Brazilian author, and he wrote this amazing book called The Alchemist. And it's basically a book about following your dreams. And that book, when I read it, it was a fairly, it really knocked me on my ass when I read that book. And it's a beautiful fable-esque kind of book. They've been trying to make it into a movie for probably a good 15, 20 years now. And
I kind of hope they don't. I'm sorry to say.
Unless
I think it's one of those books that I think it's just best left up to an individual's interpretation. But anyway, please.
Yeah, I know. I agree with you. I mean, unless it was in somebody's hands that we could trust. Like, I wouldn't mind seeing a Guillermo del Toro version of that.
I hear you.
Or even a Spielberg-esque version of that. I don't want to see a David Fincher version, but because someone's dying. But that book really changes your life when you read it. And as a filmmaker, you're going to need something to kind of go back to kind of re-inspire you to continue the journey. Because when you start out, it is a very difficult path. It's a hard path. It's going to take you years before you can make any real money. Like I always say, it's not a 12-month plan. It's a 12-year plan. It's not a 1-year plan. It's a 10-year plan. You've got to kind of always be thinking that, like, I'm going to be in this for a decade. Like, I'm giving this 10 years. That's how you should do. You got to give it 10 years. If in 10 years you can't make a living doing what you love to do or in some way in the business, then you got to reevaluate how you're approaching it. I'm not saying give up. I'm just saying reevaluate how you're approaching it and see if you've still got it to keep going. And that's a kind of book that will continue to inspire you and bring you back to the reason why you started down this path in the first place. If you're in it for fame and fortune, you're going to be eaten alive in a matter of minutes, seconds. You won't last. You won't survive. And I would argue, please get out, because you're just ruining it for the rest of us. But if you're in it with good reason, because you love it, because you want to tell stories, because you want to help people, because if you want to be a big time, Hollywood director making $200 million movies, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But if your goal is just to be rich and famous, forget it, man. You can't. You can't make it. You won't last, because it's too hard. It's too hard. The grind is too hard. It's taken me over 2 decades to now love the grind. But I'm at a different place. I'm not starting out. But if I was starting out again and I had my mind that I have now, I would love it. I would just enjoy the grind every day. And you have to love that. If you can learn how to love the grind, you will survive in the business. That is true. Yeah, because you're enjoying the journey. You've got to enjoy the journey.
And it's like when you're working on anything, if it's a script or you're shooting or editing, I mean, it's great to be goal oriented and goal focused, but you don't want to wake up at the end and post production is complete and you're like, I missed out on actually laughing and having fun on set and just enjoying the people. So yeah, guys, definitely fellow tribe members, continue enjoying the journey. I know I do. And I guess with The Alchemist, I can just say, again, from my own personal experience, it's a book that grows with you. I mean, if you read it now and you read it 5 years from now, it's almost a completely different book. So I highly recommend that book myself. It's actually a book that I constantly recommend to people.
As all good art changes as you grow, all good art does that. So that's why I'm such a fan of Stanley Kubrick, because, you watch Eyes Wide Shut when you're 15, it's not the same as when you watch it when you're 35.
That's actually my favorite Kubrick film.
It's my favorite.
I'm alone a lot on that one. See,
nope.
Dude, I knew we were connected.
No, dude, it's my favorite too. I love Eyes Wide Shut. And I just finished watching Full Metal Jacket in the theater. I saw it at Holly Shorts a few weeks ago, and it was a wonderful experience. But eyes wide shut for whatever godforsaken reason, I think it's his masterpiece. And he actually said before he passed, "This is my masterpiece." Like it was his favorite movie of all of the ones he had done.
And he passed before it premiered. I'm pretty sure.
He passed just as he finished the cut.
Ah, man. Well, I mean, what a way to go out. So Stanley, wherever you are, we appreciate it.
Man, and we miss him too. God.
And absolutely. Final question for you.
Yes.
Who is on your personal filmmaking Mount Rushmore?
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show. I'm going to say Kubrick, Hitchcock, Kurosawa. I'd probably throw Spielberg in there as well. And a contemporary, I would probably say Fincher.
I love it.
I'm going to have 5 heads on my Mount Rushmore.
All right, I'm gonna spitfire my quick 4. Okay, number 1, Kevin Smith, because without him, I would have probably never gotten into this crazy business.
Good, yeah.
2, Edward Burns.
Sure, Eddie Burns.
3, John Hughes, because his movies they make me feel so good every time I watch them, and they continually make me laugh. And he was just such a pure at heart filmmaker. And last but not least, Steven Soderbergh, because the guy is a beast of a filmmaker and, a guy who truly, I feel, advocates for the independent filmmaker. So those are my guys, man. And That's good. What? I'm going to throw my 5th Alex Ferrari up there.
Oh, please, Jesus Christ.
He's a man,
ridiculous.
Like I said, who practices what he preaches. And, man, this was such a joy. I'm so happy that we got to connect. And once again, I'm very, very grateful for everything that you do, because I can't even imagine how much work it is. But it's very clear that you put a lot of your heart into this, and you're doing a lot for people. So I'm sure that a lot of our lives are better for it. So thank you,
man. I really appreciate it, and I it is hard work without question. I mean, I don't have to put out as much content as I do. I just feel I'm slacking. So I always continue to put out more and more work, but I truly love doing this. I truly love helping people, and the more I do it, the more addicted I'm getting to it. So I just love being able to inspire through interviews with other amazing filmmakers, and if I can throw a little knowledge to somebody and a little bit of hope to somebody along the path that it can be done. And if I have to go down the road myself as a crash test dummy, I will do so, like I did with Meg. I'm all about it, and I want to continue doing it, hopefully for many years to come, and help as many artists and filmmakers, because I think the more artists and filmmakers we have out there, I think the better the world will be.
Agree 100%. All right. Well, Alex, my friend, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on my show.
No problem. Thanks a lot.
Man, I really want to thank Rob for suggesting this and doing this. And, it's surreal. It was surreal doing an interview like this with, someone from the tribe. And it was a thrill to me. And I hope you guys got something out of it. I try to make it as educational as possible and inspiring as possible. But it's weird. It's weird doing this kind of stuff on my show. So, I've done it on other shows all the time, but doing it on my show is kind of weird. But I'm really thankful for Rob for suggesting it. And I hope you guys found some sort of value in my ramblings. And guys, seriously, though, I can't do this without you guys. You guys inspire me as much as I inspire you, or the show inspires you. I couldn't have done Meg without you guys. I have a lot of stuff coming up towards the end of this year. And next year is going to be probably the most insane year of my life. And that's what I am planning on. And you guys will know all about that in the weeks and months to come. But, I rely on you guys as much as you might rely on the show, on the blog, and so on. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening through 182 episodes now and going. And I don't plan to stop anytime soon. So If you want to check out some links of some of the stuff we talked about in the episode, you could always go to the show notes at indiefilmhustle.com/182. And as always, keep that hustle going, keep that dream alive, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Indie Film Hustle podcast at indiefilmhustle.com. That's INDIEFILMHUSTLE.com.